Desiree Lopez, you are the Managing Director of research company TNS BMRB. We're talking here today about, I suppose, how to get voters engaged in the environment, yet from your research, they put it as one of the bottom, or doesn't even make the top 10 of issues. I mean, should we be worried?
I don't think we should be worried. I think what we see actually is that when we ask the general public about whether or not they're concerned about environmental issues, they are. But in relation to other key political issues, like the economy, for example, like healthcare, I think it's natural that the environmental issues don't necessarily make the top 10. So the trick is to really understand how we can make environmental issues become embedded in the other things that voters are going to be concerned about, like, for example, financial issues.
Is it changing? Are we seeing a move away or towards to the environment? Because certainly it's an issue which appears to be climbing up the agenda.
It hasn't changed necessarily, but I think, of course, naturally things like, for example, the floods have really reignited people's concerns. But again, it's about how those concerns get contextualized in terms of the things that people are really worried and concerned about. And much of that is really about the immediate impact onto households, the immediate impact into communities.
The word that was used a lot, certainly by yourself and by other people in the conference today here at the EIC conference, is disconnect. This disconnect between what the politicians are talking about and what the voters are worried about. I mean, how do you explain that?
Well, I think it's twofold, really. One is in relation to the degree to which voters and citizens actually see themselves in policies. So can they really recognize themselves and their concerns in the language that we're using to describe environmental issues, environmental concerns? And I think the second really is, and again, around the day-to-day, the lived experience of the citizen. Do they really understand how the government's looking to help what some of their experiences are, and how that then relates back to their environmental values?
So part of it is policy, but part of it is the language we're using. So are there some lessons that can be learned about changing our language?
I think so, and I think this is an area that's similar to many other areas, really, where we can become very technical in terms of the language we use. It's also an area where we can talk about policies not just at a national level, but really on an international level. And so then it's very easy for the individual citizen to not necessarily be able to understand how decisions one way or another are going to affect them at the household level.
I suppose the other way is to have a few more crises. A crisis certainly seems to engage voters, whether it's flooding, whether it's electricity blackouts. I mean, that presumably your research tells you that does engage people more.
It engages people, but it also polarizes people. So it goes back to whether or not people can see themselves, both in terms of how the government's actually responding and whether or not they're going to see material change as a result of that, but also back into that wider policy debate around whether or not those key concerns actually make the debate.
Finally, do you think are there any quick wins? We're talking about trying to influence voter intentions in 5 months' time. Are there quick wins that the industry can really embrace right now?
It was interesting today. I mean, I think the discussion about how government works with industry more widely is a great one. In relation to flooding, for example, the role of insurance agencies and actually how the insurance market can work alongside people like the Environment Agency to make sure that communities are well protected. I think there are some quick wins in relation to thinking about housing, for example, which is an absolute key priority for people more widely, and the relationship around fuel prices.
Desiree, thank you very much for joining us here today, and we will certainly watch with interest what happens to the voters in the coming election. Thanks a lot.